Okay. All right. Thanks. Yeah, it's now recording. Okay. So I've sent the PDF on the Zoom group. I'm sure everyone has seen it. That's the one I'm gonna be using to go through our study. Let me see if I can share the screen as well. Mhm. Okay. Okay. So anyone who can confirm, can you see the screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So this is a study which was done by Elder Paminda on the camp during the month of February, I think it's 17 to 19. So I just want us to go through again the first, I think it's gonna cover the first question, and we'll be expanding on the points that were raised there. I just felt that there is more to what was highlighted there, and it will be good to revisit and break down some of the things that were shared so that we really understand our experience and where we are. So as we know from this study, there were a couple of questions which were being addressed. And from those questions, I think for those we are familiar with the way Elder Paminda answers these questions. Sometimes it's not about the answer that is given, but he can highlight the bigger picture of what the questioner can lead us to see. And you are going to see that that bigger picture almost applies to everyone's experience, especially in this movement. So I was quite intrigued with the points that were raised there. We're going to read the question and go through his response. So the first question is several aspects. I recently shared a series of 10-part PDFs describing the things that would affect the world this year and the future. I hope you have had an opportunity to read and think about them, just as this person asking the question did. So there are three things that are highlighted there. The first one, which is the question of war, and then the question of economy, and then the issue of natural disasters. So in
Sorry,
addition
Milton,
to, yes, Tato?
can you check there's somebody who's at the waiting room.
Okay, sorry, yeah, yes. Okay. 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 So the first aspect which is raised in this question is the issue of actually the question is how should we prepare for all these things? And this issue is raising an experience or a concern within the movement according to how most of us have been going through this present experience. So it raises concerns in terms of how we take care of our personal needs. So according to Elder Paminda's observation, we are going to see that the issue of taking care of our personal needs, it's not actually the issue. That is actually a requirement, and each and every one of us are required to meet those demands of our personal lives. And in the present history that we are living in, it was made clear that we are living in the history of the escalation of the Sunday law. And we all understand that the Sunday law is not going to happen the way we used to think of it in the past. So as the questionnaire asked, how are we supposed to prepare? Which shows that with the changes that the midnight cry brought to our perception of how the Sunday law is going to come about, it is very clear and evident that most people are confused. And what was concerning is that the events which were predicted, if you go back to the Sunday law of the priest, for example, that was 2014. We are 8 years away from 2014. And even before, things that have been predicted that they will happen then, some of them are just happening in our present time. And two key events were mentioned. That was the COVID-19 pandemic and the war in Ukraine. So in the midst of all these things happening in our eyes, you find a question of someone asking, how are we supposed to prepare? Which means in this present moment, many of us are failing to relate to these events and how our experience should look like. So this is what he has laid very clear. So we just want to break down some of these points. Maybe individually, we can also share our experience. How are we viewing the events that are happening in relation to our experience? So the main issue which I understood from this issue is that when you come to our lives and what we are supposed to do for ourselves, it was made clear that that is not the issue. But the main concern is that as our message, we know it's based on how we treat each other in relation to equality and the issue of patriarchy. We are going to see that most individuals have failed to balance the issue of maintaining, I would say, or consistency in studying prophecy at the same time living a realistic, practical life as someone who is actually fulfilling or living in the time when events of prophecy are actually fulfilling. So this balance, according to the way Elder Paminda put it, it takes us back to the Bible and shows us that we are in a Laodicean condition. And he made it clear that this has been happening for a couple of years, going back maybe from ever since 2018 when the Midnight Cry came. I know there's a lot of excitement and fear at the same time, which came with the Midnight Cry. The part of excitement is that for those who accepted the message, we were able to see our mistakes, and we could see that there are some changes in our experience which were needed to be made. But the fear part of it is that when all this understanding comes, I think as time lapsed, we are now struggling to put the two together. The current experience which we are supposed to have, the nature of the work has changed. All the things that surround our life, when we compare from the way we used to approach things before, it seemed as if when the message came, we understood what it means. But it's now showing that we did not really grasp or understood the whole concept of what we are required to do. So in light of this observation of saying that we have been now taught by the message as it is advancing, that we need to approach things in a very sensible and reasonable manner. This includes the way we view our duty in the movement and also the way we deal with our personal lives. So I would like us to maybe discuss how do people understand or how people are viewing their own experience in light of what has been shared by Elder Paminda in this current dispensation. When we are seeing that most of us have fallen into a Laodicean condition, maybe some are discouraged, some are losing zeal, whatever that we are going through. I just want few people to share their own understanding based on this. What is it that we are going through, and how do we see ourselves maybe lacking? What is it that we are failing to balance so that we can revive that zeal that we used to have in the past? Anyone who wants to share their own experience? Anyone? We have 15 participants. Anyone who wants to volunteer to start?
Hello, Milton.
Yes, Tato.
May you please repeat your question?
Okay. So I'll go back to, okay, I'll just summarize the background. So in this study, which Elder Paminda shared, we saw that it was made clear that since the Midnight Cry arrived in 2018, it required us to make a lot of changes in terms of how we view the message and also how we deal with our personal lives. So in light of these changes, I was saying there was a lot of excitement when the message came, but at the same time, as time lapsed, we see that many people are now confused. We know that there was an extreme view about false freedom and all those things which the Midnight Cry was polishing in our lives. So in light of the question which was asked, that how are we supposed to prepare for the crisis that is lying ahead, it actually reveals the condition of what we are actually going through, what we are experiencing. And this is the majority of people in the movement. And the observation which Elder Paminda made is that it's actually showing that many people have now failed to balance our reasonable practical experience with our prophetic duty as priests. So my question is, I want individuals to share their personal experience. How do we understand this observation? How are we failing to balance our personal lives with our prophetic duty? I know it's in different forms according to individual, but it is the majority of us that are going through this experience.
Yeah, your question is very deep, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, deep and tricky all at the same time. Because I will share from my own experience. Um, you know, one thing that ever since the Midnight Cry came in, I never took time to actually point a finger at somebody else. I first look at myself and then ask myself, am I in par with what is actually being said? You see? And
Mm-hmm.
it was hammering me in all the wrongs that I have done to those whom we're still close, to those who I still had contact to. I had to go back and amend my ways and apologize to those people of how I have probably mistreated them in the past, if I have mistreated them. You say that. And to those whom I have wronged, I made those apologies. So, one thing that I can say is that it hits home. And the way it hits home so hard that it leaves no stone unturned because of the depth of the root of patriarchy. You know the how deep patriarchy has went. So to take out that root, it needs so much work to actually excavate it out with its little with the with the other legs have spread in the other facets of one's life. You see that. So it the midnight cry for me, it actually showed me how I'm actually sinking and how much I need to cry out to the Lord to actually help me to not sink. You see, if I can use that parable for people to understand. So it every day becomes a battle, every day becomes a victory when one goes to sleep, because of you look at yourself throughout the day and you look at how you have connected yourself throughout the day. And we know that how much actually patriarchy impacts the people around us, even through our own actions as individuals, you see. So that's the midnight cry. And with that little, we can write a book, but with that, just summarize, that's how it actually it's working. I would say it has not yet fully transformed because of there are still processes within the one's life that needs to be reformed as one discovers, hey, here you are actually in error. You need to amend your ways. Here, actually, you're not supposed to be doing this. You need to amend your ways. You see that? So I'll just summarize it in that way. I don't know if that's what you were actually looking for.
Okay, thank you, Tato, for that. So, okay, connecting what you are saying, just flashing back to the 3 points that were mentioned in the question. There is the issue of the war, there is the issue of the economic changes, and also the issue of natural disasters, which are connected to climate change. So basically, what I'm asking is that based on these 3 things which have impacted our lives so greatly, in light with the 10 points that, or those PDFs which were sent, are showing how the whole world is going to change drastically in the negative side. I think the counsel was that some of these events are examples. For example, the issue of how the defeat of Russia is going to impact the world, the aftermath of the war. If this war is to end, what does this mean to the world? What does this mean to Putin? We know this is not going to only end with Ukrainians and Russians. To a larger extent, this is a global impact. And we have seen as soon as this war began, everyone started to see changes, either from the prices of things escalating, even in those who are working, we started to see how companies are struggling to keep up with the operate because of the impact of how this war is impacting everyone. And I remember Elder Paminda made the point that everyone should break down these things to their own even individual experience, like for each and every one of us to see how do you respond to all these effects around. Because at the end of the day, all these effects are going to come down to us as individuals, and we still have to live in this world until the second advent. So that's the basis of my question. Like, how are we responding to all these changes which are happening around us? Tato, you can go ahead.
Oh, so with what I said, and then adding to what you're actually saying, it's the Ukrainian war. It actually reveals a more deeper seated prejudices if I can just put it like that. Like, for example, within the Ukrainian war, you see the issue of victimhood, the mind games that the perpetrator continues to play. You see, and then when I reflect that and I look at my own life, and then I see some elements of the same spirit that actually Putin is displaying in the world, and how he's actually playing out his disinformation to get his own ways. It reflects by which when as an individual, how is that actually playing out in your own life? You see that even when it comes to the issue of climate change, uh, how deep it actually, when you just look at it with a person with privileges as a man, it does not, it may affect me, yes, but who is it affecting even more? You see, it's
Mhm.
uh it affects women more. The W the Human Rights Council, they were showing some statistics that the issue of climate change, at the bottom of all these things, who gets to suffer the most? It's actually women. When you look at the pandemic, for example, the pandemic, who got to be kicked out of jobs? Was it men or was it women? It affected women more because of when you look at men, they are sitting in these privileges. Yes, they have been affected. I don't want to lie. Yes, but then who's getting more affected? It's actually women, and that it's not even in the radars of many people because of uh this this bigger picture of shadows, how actually it's actually playing out at the bottom of everything else, that women are actually suffering. You go to the right, you go to the left, it women are actually suffering. Look at what's happening in Ukraine. Look at the rapes that are being committed by the Russian soldiers. You see that, and yet you have a president who's just standing back and telling people that, look, no, I did not invade any people. I'm just doing what is rightfully mine. You see that. So
Mhm.
yeah, when I take that and then I look at how it's affecting me, how actually it's in connection with myself as an individual. I see how much actually it actually impacts other people, even myself, in put it in that. But mostly, I'm actually emphasizing women are at the suffering the most in all these things that are happening. You look at the news, women are actually suffering, and many news don't even cover what women are going through.
Okay, thank you, Tato. Tato Mashego.
Thank you, Milton. I think your question, yeah, it goes deep because uh, what has been, I think, nice before when it comes to the movement is that the subject of the personal is political, because when Elder Pamenda was explaining this, obviously was talking about the Levites and looking at the Levites as an institution and looking at the Levites as an individual. Then he also brought that concept with the priest and looking at the priest as an institution and looking at the priest as an individual. And then he got to the subject that you can find a good priest and a bad priest, but we are all priests. And then this, obviously, it's gonna level down to if we bring it like that in the movement, we are all priests, but then it becomes personal when you start to say then there's a bad priest and a good priest. Because when you look at the movement as an institution, obviously you can say that we are all good, like the ship is good, everyone, it's sailing and things like that. But obviously when it comes to the Sunday law, the ship is going to crash, and then it gets to that point then as individuals, and we look at it in an individual perspective. And I don't want to lie, this is a hard journey, because I was reading this document right now, and is this part, I've lost it. Okay, let me just look for, oh yeah, it's how many paragraphs are here? But it's the second of last paragraph. And then it says, if I can put it this way, God and the world, when you disengage your practical life here on earth from your religious life, for 99% of the people, there is only one outcome. The world will always win. So it's going back to what even Tato was saying, that, hey, when you look at everything that's going on in this world, you see how much like this world is failing God in all aspects, whether it's at work, whether you're just going to the shopping mall, whether you are engaging with people, whether you're engaging with your family. You just see how like the world is fading, and it's so easy to compromise. It's so easy to disengage from your religious life, because this is not an easy test. This is when you see now that the test is actually testing now who you are, but not the institution, because the institution is sealed. That the institution, this is God who's leading it. This is God correcting the mistakes which were done 6,000 years ago. And now it's like our turn, It's, hey, yeah, this, as Tato said it's a very deep question, because it even brings you to a introspection, uh, because at the end of the day, there's this quotes that I posted. It's bell hooks, and she says that it doesn't matter what like you believe or what you say, but what will always take note is obviously what you do. And by just taking that, you just have to always do what's right, even when like no one is watching, And yeah, this is like I must say, like it's a real test, because uh, you just have to live by the principles, so that you're not in this liudation condition where you are now like you are serving both masters. You are in the movement, and while you are also compromising when it comes to this principle. No matter how hard is it, you just need to stick with your beliefs. But it's I must say it's a very challenging issue, this one. But for us to be successful, we just have to step our foot down and really do what is right all the time, though it's not an easy journey. Yeah, that's what I can say when it comes to my experience and how now the test has come very close to home. Because as a group we can walk, but when it's now facing you, it becomes something else. Yes, it's what I can just share.
Okay. Thank you, Tato, for that. Anyone else who wants to add?
Hello, Milton.
Yes, can go ahead.
So I got a bit confused when Tato, or they were both Tatos, and I lost my connection, so I didn't quite get the question. But the Tato that just spoke now spoke about the corporate priesthood and the individual, and then connected the corporate body to the ship, which is going to be to shipwreck. But I thought that I became a little bit confused because I thought the sheep was the Adventist church and the priesthood is 144,000. Therefore, the 144,000 as a body is the people that have the final message. These are the stone that's carved out of the mountain, unless I'm mistaken, and that then will grow into, grows into a huge whatever and covers the whole earth. So in other words, the way I understand it is that the priesthood, the 144,000, the stone, this is representing the people that have the truth at the end of the world. This is not the nominal church, which is the ship that's going down, but among the 144,000, I don't know if we can put it like this, because the elder is now suggesting that they are good priests and bad priests. So as a corporate body, we have the truth, and the line shows that this is a line of success. So isn't it that the priesthood is going to succeed and going through, and that there is no such thing as a bad priesthood at a corporate level? But I do understand that there is good priests and bad priests at an individual level, because some of us are going to only profess the truth and not live it. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, as you were saying that, I think your connection was not well. The question came from, if you see the PDF on the screen, there was a question which came from someone in the movement. And the question was based on how are we supposed to prepare for the Sunday law in light of three things were highlighted: the changes which the wars happening in the world is bringing, the economic effect, and also the natural disasters in connection with climate change. So in answering this question, Elder Paminda discovered that the issue is not about answering the question itself, but it's identifying or becoming aware of what is actually the problem. And one of the observation that he made was that it's showing that individuals in this movement have disconnected their practical life and their prophetic duty. So by default, that's a working definition of a Laodicean condition. So the question was, how do we, I know the experience of each individual being in a Laodicean state, it varies from individual to individual. And the percentage to which this problem has actually gone is like the majority, put it at 99% of the people are actually confused about how we are supposed to be handling our personal lives and at the same time fulfilling our duties as priests. So that's where the question came from. And the whole issue of bad priests, I think Chato was still within the context of people within the movement who are actually failing even to identify the role of the body and also their individual work, something like that. I see Chato has got a hand. I don't know if you want to elaborate on your comments, but that was the background where the question came from.
Okay.
Okay, I'll give Tato Mashego and then back to Elder D.
Kuphela ne-rice, muthanda i-rice kube uyifudumeze.
I'm just I think there's someone else who's speaking. Oh, okay. Yes, no, the point I was making is that like on at the Sunday law, the Adventists, yeah, the point that I was making is that I was bringing upon the Sunday law issue. That's why I brought the ship. I think I also it was a mistake on my side to say the ship and put it with the priest, but my mistake was that it's Adventism, that the ship is going to go down. But the point that I was making is that at the Sunday law, like I think every time the line progress, what's going to happen is that our characters are going to be revealed until obviously the second coming. So the point that I was making is that inside the, if we look at Levites, and that's where, like, I think Elder Pamanda started, like, you're looking at Levites as an institution and Levites as a individual, yes. And then you took that same, it doesn't destroy the message. I think that concept doesn't destroy the message that the priests have, but it speaks about this condition that the priest also might be in. If you can look at like Levites as in that perspective, then you have to take that same perspective and then you apply it now to the priest. Doesn't mean that the priest, they don't have, as like when I concluded, maybe Elder Doreen didn't hear me, but as like I concluded, what I mentioned was that the message is correct. The message has been finalized. But now what the message is doing is that, are you living up to its full potential? To the full potential of the message? Are you convicted of this message the way you say that, the way you profess that you say like you do, or the way you say that you believe that you do? Are you living by the principle? It's where practical life comes in. And then, yeah, what also I mentioned is that we might meet and we might all be in same accord, but then when we go back to like our individual life, we are faced with many challenges. And this is where now we are truly tested, that are we either good priest or bad priest, and based on this laudation condition. Yes, I think it's clear. Yes.
Okay. Yes, Elder Doreen, is there anything else you want to add?
I wanted to ask, this wrong thing that we are doing when we are separating our our personal lives from the message. How are we doing that? I just need clarity on that part. How does that manifest?
Okay, yeah, that's actually, I think my question was more of internal, even individual experiences. I understand Tato broadened the context, but that's the type of question I want us to break down to, like, individually. Where are we missing? I think I've even emphasized, how do we relate to this? How do we split these two things? Because it's a subtle condition that we are not aware of, most of us. And it shows when, especially, questions come through, like people asking, are we supposed to live? While at least we are living in the time period when events are fulfilling. So that's the question which we really need to, like, break down individually and answer. How are we splitting the experience of a priest who knows prophecy is fulfilling from our personal lives, especially our needs? Because that's where the questions were coming from.
I see. Okay, so it's actually the subject, the thing we're trying to address.
Yes.
So my thinking is, if we can go back to the days when we were conservative, how did we live our lives? Maybe that could help us get to the answer, because we tried to. I'm thinking through this as I'm trying to speak, but there was a disconnection. There was a disconnection between what we thought was the right way to live as a Christian, as opposed to the reality of life. The reality of life was that we are in the 21st century, we are in the information age. There's been so much advancement in terms of technology and knowledge, and even the study of scripture. And yet, as present truth believers, we wanted to go back to the Stone Age. We wanted to go back in terms of our lifestyle, how we lived our lives. We took our children out of the school system. We wanted to go and live in the countryside, in the deep, darkest bush possible, and grow our own food and make our own soap, make our own. And the reality of that lifestyle, it was just not in sync with the reality of life. So when I go back to that time and I'm thinking about that disconnection, I then try to bring it into the post midnight cry era and think to myself how I might be bringing that mindset across 2018 and bring it here and live unrealistically, and my life to be out of sync with the reality of life. Because I think that's why Elder Parmendat ended up speaking about the fact that if one needs to make a living, that needs to continue, because that's the reality of life. One needs to work and earn a living. And the person that is asking this question, how are we supposed to live, is probably operating from the conservative mindset where we had separated the two, our personal experiences and the message, and dealt with them at a different, creating this gap. For me, I feel that question comes from that mindset, the conservative mindset, where we had learned to separate things. But we have realized that our message, our midnight cry message, has taken us out of the bush, out of the country living, out of the don't take kids to school mindset, and plunged us back into a space of reality. And the reality of life is that one has to work, one has to make a living, one has to pay rent, And if we are talking about gender equality now, you're talking even about people who should not be dependent on others in terms of the way marriage was structured and relationships in the past. So we are living in a time now when we are empowering women, encouraging them to go to school, encouraging them to go to work, become financially independent. So how are we now going to separate the reality of life from what the message is doing? Because the message is forcing us to actually be realistic and not have to separate the two the way we used to do in the past. Sorry, maybe I'm just bringing more confusion. That's where
Okay.
I'm coming from.
Yeah, just adding on, contrasting our present dilemma with the past, I'll add on even to my own experience. When you go back to 2017, 2018, in light with the conviction that we had about the nearness of the Sunday law, there was one thing playing in our mind. There was fear. The source of this fear was that the world is against us and we are going to be persecuted. So we were victims of our own conspiracy that we had created. The one world order, which is coming, the Sunday law, the issue of the Sabbath. So in connection with country living, during that era, it was easy to make a decision, for example, to even quit your job and say, I have to go to the country. If it means I lose a job, my child, I can't afford to take them to the school, I have to take homeschooling. That was the option. So all the decisions we're making, they were not problematic to us because there was the conviction driven by fear that we have to make these choices. Either way, we are going to be persecuted for our faith. So this fear could cast away the reality of the problems we're creating around ourselves. So coming now after 2018, all these duties that we took in our mind out of faith that we are doing a sacrifice to God, we were brought back to them and told that actually you are not supposed to abandon these duties. And the Sunday law on top of that is not going to happen the way you think. So some had to start reconnecting their lives. Maybe someone is now in the country, some had even to come back in the cities. I'm just giving a background. When all these decisions are being made, it brought a lot of confusion. So some had even abandoned dates, or some had all these other issues which were just left hanging. We had to come back to these realities and face them again. So the dilemma is that these things are now entangling our mind to an extent that we are now more focused of fixing our lives and get the daily going on to a point where we end up neglecting even studying or even seeing the fulfillment of events and how are we supposed to take part in this fulfillment of prophecy. So this is where actually I see Elder Pamela driving us to think like, how are we balancing the reasonable duties of life, daily life, and understanding that we are going to be in this crisis until the second advent. I don't know if it's making sense or making the picture clear.
Yeah, it's made it clear. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, I see Tato has got a hand.
Hey, Milton. So
Yeah.
I remember this. Just to add a piece, the swinging of a pendulum. Like we were in one extreme of the end, and then we swung to the other extreme of the end when the midnight cry actually came. So that's the disconnect. That on the other side, we were fearful and we were disconnecting reality, and we wanted to be in the bush. We needed to eat and live, and we said, no, God will take care of us. The midnight cry came, and then we swung to the other side. Now we forget about the nearness of the Sunday. Now the fear has been banished. Now we were too focused on the on the temporary, like the day-to-day living, because of we have missed um let's say 2 years, 3 years of our own lives. So
Yes.
it went to that extreme. So coming back
Yeah.
to balance these two things, you should still know that you need to be in touch with what is happening. God is still,
Mhm.
yes. The Sunday law is still coming. All those things, and yet you need to provide all at the same time. And then for people, it becomes too much because of they need to study, and yet they are worried about
Mhm.
it. They need to go to work. They need to try and see how they actually feed their families. So yeah, I
Mhm.
think just to add that, I think what Elder D and you said make perfect sense.
Yes, yes, that's the true picture of this disconnect. We went from one extreme, and
Thank you.
these extremes are in varied forms. There was extremism even in trying to profess to be holy. We have addressed some of the extremes, but there still are the extremes which are left. That is why we thank God that our message is progressive, and the more the truth get advanced, we continue to unravel the depth of how sexism and patriarchy has destroyed us. So we have addressed some of these extremes, but there are still more extremes which we are still deep into. So this is one layer of another extreme, that the cares of this world, in as much as we know the quotes which talks about the cares of the world, all those quotes, we have read them so many times, but when the reality of how we are now confronted with balancing back, fixing the problems that we had created, and still believing that we are living in a period where prophecy is fulfilling, we are now struggling to get the balance. Where should we draw the line? Should I spend my day on work more than studying? All those basics that we used to know well, we are now like in trouble with that. So I think that's the sense which we need to individually like evaluate our experience daily. I can even add to my own experience. When you try to even look at the basic, one of the things that we need to do, like to check on each other. In most cases, if you don't actually look for certain individuals, you can go to 6 months or even a year without someone just saying hi, just to check a basic thing of finding out how is your fellow believer doing. Just those things. And the time you discover, or when you check someone, you would find that they've got a lot of confusion, people are discouraged and all these things, but people are just quiet, and you can see that the zeal is not there anymore. And what is it that is bringing this confusion, this discouraged condition? I think it's the thoughts of facing the reality that we had thought it's not our duty to worry, God can do those things. And now we are seeing that God is not going to actually provide for our basic daily needs. We still need to, in light of the effects of the things like the economic changes, which are actually predicting that these things are going to be more difficult. So the extreme we had in the past was that God was going to feed us even in the mountains. We don't need to worry about food. God is going to send food like he did to Elijah. Now we are faced with the reality that God might not do that in our situation. So when you compress all these things, it brings a lot of pressure mentally. And some people might end up thinking it's the message which is actually confusing me. And that's where this Laodicean state subtly creeps in our experience without us noticing.
Thank you. Makes sense, especially the example that Tato has given. It that illustration of the swinging pendulum.
Mhm.
It really illustrates it well, because we are now on the other extreme, and the cares of life has overtaken us, because we are also trying to catch up with the lost time we lost, you know, in those days pre 2018, and now we are trying to catch up. And so we're spending so much time and effort and energy and resources in trying to catch up, because if we had done those things in the past, maybe we would be in a better position and would have more time now to focus on the study of the word, I mean, keeping up with the prophetic message. But we are spending that time now trying to catch up with lost time. It's quite scary, because those of us that didn't think about educating our children in the formal system, we now find that the children have grown up. We didn't save enough money for them to go to higher institutions. Now it requires us to work harder to make those resources available. Yeah, it's hectic, because that's exactly what's taking away much of our focus.
Yes, that's true. And also when you add to that dilemma that in as much as we are now in our minds processing that doing the opposite of what we're doing is actually maybe the better option to do, we are finding out that prophecy is actually showing that even the decision of taking back, for example, kids to the formal school, it's not going to remove the dangers also, which in terms of patriarchy and sexism, this is the source of the problem, where actually kids are trained sexism through this educational system, which is actually modeled through the model of patriarchy. So when you look at all these things, like whatever we think is the right thing to do, I can give another example. For example, myself, I'm an immigrant. I've been in South Africa for 10 years. I'm like, okay, things are going bad here. Maybe I need to go to another country. Whatever option you have, it's not like that's the best option you have, because there are actually also problems that you are going to face. And it's just the rate at which the effects are going to impact us. But otherwise, all the options that we are taking, they still need to be guided with faith that we are actually supposed to focus on the truth, because all these things are just to manage ourselves in the crisis. So for the sake of time, in closing, I just want us to maybe consider going back to some of the old prophecies that we used to like so much and look at them anew. For example, the chapter of Daniel, chapter 3, we know the story of the 4 Hebrew men which were tested on the Mount of Dura. When the illustration is there, is the raising of the ensign, when the mark of the beast is now pitching its mark. We know that the experience of Daniel and his friends is that they had to make a choice. There's a crisis that is looming ahead of them. They need to either abandon their faith or they stand for the truth and face the consequences. And we know that Nebuchadnezzar pre-warned them that they are going to heat the furnace 7 times than its normal temperature. What you are going to see that is in this story, Daniel and his friends, they are not supposed to worry about the furnace being heated 7 times or the fire that they are going to go through. All they had to do is to focus on defending the truth and leave the rest in God's hands. We know the story, how it played out. They were thrown into the fire, God intervened and saved them. So when you take the parable in this story in our time, we are seeing that all these crises are actually escalating worldwide. It's a global issue, be it economic, be it wars, and the effect that it ripples as you go from country to country. So all these problems are not going to be solved. And our gospel is not a gospel of problem solving, but God wants us to manage to carry through our faith in this crisis, just as Daniel did with his 4 friends. So it's not to say we need not to be concerned about all these things around us, but we are not going to change the outcome. And at the end of the day, we still have to focus on our duty and what we've been raised for. So that is the main issue that we should be putting our energies on. So I think if we go back to some of those stories, we are going to get a different strength and encouragement when we use a different methodology in trying to understand how are we now failing to live up to the light that we have sacrificed so much for so long. So that is my last comment, and we have just addressed only the introduction. I think this whole study on its own, it opens a lot of discussions. Actually, all the questions which were answered, there are actually discussions on them on, and they help us to have a bigger picture of where are we missing it. And when you look at the message to the 7 churches, God does this systematically to actually show that this is his love to his people. Those whom he loves, he chastises and rebukes. And once we take this with faith and knowing that God is not willing to destroy us, but he wants to save us, we are not going to be more confused and more discouraged, but we'll come back to our senses and realize that actually God is just doing what he's been doing all the time. It's always us who misunderstand the nature of work, the work that God is doing in our lives. So for me, this message, it's actually a rebuke showing us that we need to go back to our basics and just keep our focus on our duty. Nothing has changed. The Sunday law is still coming, even though the nature of events is changing, but the whole scope of the second advent, end of the world, things are just falling in place. And we need to be more sensitive because some of these things are actually happening in front of our eyes. I hope it has been an encouragement and a blessing just to go back to some of these things and be able to see ourselves in the true light that God is actually revealing it to us. I don't know if there's anyone who wants to add anything or we can close.
Milton,
Yes.
just before you close, you raise up a point. You said the priests were raised up for certain duty, for certain work.
Yes.
I'm not trying to open a discussion now, but what is that duty the priest was raised up for? Because right now it looks like we haven't started our duty. I'm not sure if I'm losing you. We are still busy trying to understand ourselves, and we are still busy with ourselves. We haven't even started the duty that we were raised up for.
If I'm understanding your question, I will put it in the way Elder Paminda responded, because this is in connection with we as priests, we believed at the end of the line of the priest, we are supposed to go and gather the Levites. But in light of after 2021, we have seen that there is a high possibility that we have misunderstood the fulfillment of all the prophecies which pointed to that dispensation which talks of gathering of the Levites. And recently, I think in the last study, Elder Paminda made it clear that currently as priests, we are actually jobless. We don't have a job to do because we are not ready to go to the Levites. So this is the prophetic terminology that he uses, unless there is more to be said on that. But for now, I'll just put it like that to say, we haven't been commissioned as a body to go and do the work of gathering the Levites. We have not yet understood what that looks like and how it's going to be done. So in the midst of this, we have to still remember that even as priests, there's still work to be done. And that is where the concern is coming, that we are also certainly in a condition where we are not able to fulfill our duties. I'm not sure if there's a connection between our condition and not able to go out and do a work. But these are two things which have been made clear right now, that we are not in the right stage in terms of balancing our duty and our personal lives. And there's not yet a commission to say we need to go out and do a certain work. So that's the current position which we are in right now. If that helps to answer your question, but it can be a discussion on its own. I get it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
no. Can we say maybe, because you're talking as a group now, can we come
Yes.
to an individual level with that concept?
For me, the individual concern, which is at present, is the one of fixing this issue of balancing our experience and also making sure that we are keeping up with following the events of prophets that are fulfilling. If there's any further duty within the jurisdiction of individuals, we know like there are people who are fellowshipping at homes, there are people who visit Adventist church, all those different forms of individual experience. I cannot say this is the one which we are supposed to do everyone. It depends with individuals, but me looking at the prophetic rebuke that comes to us, we should be focusing on addressing the concern of us now falling into a situation where we don't realize that we are not prepared for the events that are fulfilling right in our eyes. Yes.
Yeah. No, understood. Get you.
Okay. So I hope this can be an ongoing discussion. Like as I've said, this study unpacks a lot of discussions, and it will be more beneficial just to take it step by step, one point at a time, and make this our personal experience to make sure that we all understand what we are going through, and it will be a real benefit. But for the sake of time, we'll close here. I'll ask Chato to pray for us. Chato Mashego. I think Tato Mashego is kicked out, or Tato Makoto.
Milton. Okay. So, Sia Chandaza. Our kind and loving God, thank you so much for the lesson we have had. Thank you, Lord, for bringing us to the reality of our current condition. And thank you for the servant you have used and our elders that you are constantly using. We ask that, oh God, may you help us to be in path with what you are showing us and revealing unto us. And thank you, Lord, that the work which you are doing for us and for all other people in the world in which we live in, it's so great in saving those who are actually being abused. So we ask that, please, God, lead us now and forevermore. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.